first moved to Ghana in 2007, it was exactly the same.
Nothing has changed.
There was a brief period where things improved, and now they have slipped back again. And this is why, when the economy is growing and there is signs that this economic growth can be sustained and can maybe even be accelerated, we are deeply worried that the energy sector is letting down the rest of the economy.
Your report is titled Energizing Economic Growth in Ghana.
Yes.
Are we energizing the growth well enough?
No, that's precisely the issue, that the energy sector is becoming, or could further hinder this country's economic growth unless the problems are fixed in the sector. And that is really the main theme of this report, that unless there's more proactive measures taken, the economy is going to be held back.
So we have done something, but not proactive enough. That's how you want to put it.
One has to have a strategic vision, anticipate what is going to happen, and take decisions today so that tomorrow we're not faced with lights going off and then having to scramble to find solutions to how to get generators or how to get fuel to keep the lights on.
What have we done wrong? The report catalogs a number of issues, but precisely, what have we done wrong in fixing the challenges with the energy sector?
Well, if you want to stick with the subject of generation, power generation,
right?
Why isn't there enough power generation capacity in this country? The reasons lie with the fact that the public sector didn't have the financial resources to build more power plants because these are expensive and there's a limit to what the state can be expected to do. And the private sector was not able to invest either because the conditions necessary for private money to come into power generation were not there. If a private bank is going to lend money to a project to generate power, the private bank will need to have guarantees that the loan will be repaid. It will therefore look at who is buying the power. If you're a private company generating power in Ghana, you're going to sell essentially to ECG.
Right.
Well, look at ECG's commercial and financial situation. There's a problem there. ECG is not collecting the revenue that it should be. It's not paying VRA. So immediately you have a cash crunch. So as a private lender, you're going to say, I need to be covered against the risk of non-payment by ECG. And for one reason or another, it's very difficult to get guarantees against those kind of payment risks.
In your
so the result is the private people are not investing either.
Are not interested in investing.
No, they are interested, but the conditions are not there.
Now, if you say conditions, because ECG is unable to raise enough revenue, it will not be able to pay the IPPs, independent power producers. That is where
that is certainly one element. But you see, ECG's energy losses. I'm talking about energy, not money losses. Energy losses are so high that it is buying, say, 4 units of power from VRA to sell 3 units to the public. Now, how can you make money, regardless of what the price of your units are, if you buy 4 and sell 3? This is the ECG business model.
Did the report try to tease out why the state would not be so keen on improving the energy sector, especially when it is so important to economic development?
No, I think the difficulty is that the sector is very, very hard to manage for any government because there are many, many entities, there are many players, both on the government side as well as in terms of the service providers. There's issues of who reports to whom, who is accountable for what, or not accountable, we should say rather, because there are many instances of...
the structure is
so
amorphous.
It is very, very...
You don't have
the job of energy minister in Ghana today is the most difficult job of any minister after the finance minister.
Right.
And he's really in the hot seat.
You stay there. Let me take a quick break. Sunil Matharani, Senior Energy Specialist of the World Bank, is still in the studio. I'm taking a short break, and when I come back, we'll continue the discussion. Stay there. This is PM Express. Welcome back to PM Express. And Mr. John Peter Mewu, the Director of Research and Policy of the African Center for Energy Policy, has just joined us. Welcome to PM Express.
Thank you.
Before we left off, I left off with Suni Matarani. He said that the job of the Energy Minister of Ghana is one of the most difficult after the Finance Minister due to the energy crisis. Would you want to agree?
Yeah, I think his job would have been the most easiest job if he had been in a regime where there's excess supply over demand. Unfortunately, he finds himself in the negative side, and so that makes his job quite difficult. But you need to be in a difficult position, and then you think properly. And so again, that's going to make his job very easy because he has to come up with alternative solutions to address the problem. And if he's able to do that, then he's really a minister. So I wouldn't say he's in a very difficult position, but it's the position in which he is now. It's rather going to make him to think, because as a minister, you need to think and come out with innovative ideas.
And have we, as a society, brought this challenge on us? Would you describe what is happening to us this way? That we have brought this difficulty, this energy challenge on us, on ourselves?
I think to a large extent, yes, and it's also has been a part of cumulative, build-up from government efforts and inability of government to take certain strong decisions. We've seen clearly the delay in implementation of the gas policy by the current government administration, and that is critical to where we are now. If you agree with me, since last year, we reiterated it over and over again. If the current administration had initiated moves to commence the gas process that was started by the earlier administration properly, by now we'd have finished the gas process, and we'll have gas flowing. And so even we have a shortfall from Nigeria, the Jubilee gas could be doing that. But because of political decision in terms of the political economy, that was not done. And so that is also a problem. So to a large extent, yes, our own political decisions and inability to take strong and firm decisions has brought us to where we are now. But the problem, last year when we spoke, I said this thing is not going to end now and it's going to worsen. And if we don't take critical solutions as of today, beyond 2015 to 2017, our energy problem, it's going to be as worse than what we are witnessing. There's no doubt about it.
We'll spend a greater chunk of our time talking about those critical solutions we need to look at in resolving this. But Mr. Matarani, let's come back to the report. Now, one of the areas that the report spoke about is the governance structure of these institutions. You think that it has contributed to running down operations. How well has this been part of the problem?
Oh, it's definitely part of the problem. There are 12 or 13 state-owned companies in the energy sector. This may come as a surprise to some of the people in the audience. It's that many. And some of these are small, some of them are extremely large and extremely powerful empires, if you like, which are not properly accountable. And certainly the energy minister is not in a position to tell GMPC or VRA what to do. They have boards, and the boards are appointed by the office of the president. So the minister is a little bit handicapped in that these entities are not directly under his
He's
authority.
unable to control them.
Then, who sits on the boards? One has to do a scrutiny of the people who are appointed to these boards. Are these the best and most talented professionals and managers that Ghana can offer to these large entities? I would beg to differ. In some cases, there are some very top people, but there are also people who are sitting on these boards who do not bring any significant value to those corporations. And these are the people that are giving the management the signals.
Let's stay on this a bit. Now, you think that those on the boards are not perhaps the best. Is that because of their expertise, or based on the way they were appointed, they are unable to function properly in their positions?
The political tradition in this country, you know better than I, is that very often positions on boards are reward that the political parties offer to their party faithful. So in some cases, you're going to get people on these boards of state enterprises, and it goes beyond the energy sector, who, as I said, may not bring much to the running of the company that they have been put in charge of. And so if at that level you don't have the proper leadership and the guidance, and you don't have people who can provide the kind of top-level oversight and supervision and hold the management accountable, then the management itself can more or less also be lax in terms of how they run the company and the relations with their own staff. There isn't enough performance monitoring, there isn't enough accountability, and the multiplicity of institutions and players also makes it very difficult, because there are overlapping areas, there are turf issues, and at the end of the day, it's very hard to say, where does the buck stop?
Mr. Mewu, but is this a problem that permeates the general governance structure? Or perhaps we should be talking about an isolated case here with the utilities?
No, this is not an isolated case. I think John would agree with me.
Isolated cases as such, but I strongly wouldn't say institutional appointments are not good. Institutional appointments from various agencies are equally good, because actually they bring their experiences to bear, on the sector in terms of advisors. But then where those appointments, as he rightly put it, are people who haven't got, because this area, it's a knowledge-intensive area, the energy sector. And so if you're going to make those appointments, you must bring on board from the various, institutions, people who can make an impact to drive the sector in a specific direction to achieve your stated goals and objectives. And so, yes, I know the current board, there's quite some members that are very okay, but some don't have the energy background. Notwithstanding that, within the setup itself, there's supposed to be a technical drive up to drive the direction. So even if the institutional appointees are being placed there for reward for political purposes, we expect the technical staff and the administration to be able to do the work. Some will say, well, they are not doing the work because the appointees themselves, who are getting this position because of reward, are relaxed in undertaking some decision. Yes, that I will agree with you. But notwithstanding that, institutional appointment to a large extent bring to bear, on the board some experiences from the various institutions. But apart from these managerial problems in the sector, I think that the problems goes just beyond the managerial issues. One of the difficulties that we have in the sector, it's lack of financing.
For the sector?
Lack of financing. And this financing has to do with inadequate provisions for regulatory drive in terms of the fiscal regimes that will allow the financing to come on board. If I'm a good investor, I look at the rate of my return and see what is expected value I expect to generate from this investment. And so the sector, in terms of the regulatory drive, are not enticing as it is now. Nobody will come and put this money into the energy sector. So government can do everything. Yes, we want to do a PPP.
You can have the best people in there. If the financing is not
there. If the financing doesn't come, how do you drive the sector? Because this sector is a whole value chain starting from generation to burner tip, where you and I consume the power. What we need now is generation drive. And generation drive needs to be backed with financing. How do we get the financing? The person who has to come with the finance wants to know what is being paid at the burner tip. The person who is the burner tip, consuming the power, wants to know whether he's getting a reliable supply of power, an efficient supply of power, to give the supplier the amount of money that he deems, to transfer to the generator. So that is how the system works. So currently, financing is an issue we need to look at. And as a country, the question we should be asking is, how do we drive finance to the generation sector? I think that in the generation, I have read the report, and one of the reasons why I think I would disagree with the World Bank report to some extent is that they've not been able to specify clearly how, which of the areas they are looking of privatization in terms of liberalization.
Right.
This sector, you need to make some form of liberalization. You liberalize the sector before you achieve competition. You cannot achieve competition without liberalization. Meanwhile, you can do liberalization without competition. And so I think that at generation, you need to put in some competition at generation level. Currently in Ghana, there is no competition at generation. So the minister can just invite competitors in and sit down in the room and negotiate for the power generation. Don't forget, at the point of generation, your investment drive runs over your rate of return, and that translates to your tariff.
Do you think that the IPPs will want to come in, from what you're saying, if the tariffs not good enough, would the IPPs want to come into that level?
They will not come in at that level when the tariffs are not very good. And
right.
So we need to...
Just hold it. We'll come back to this, but let me speak to Tony Oteng-Gyesi. He is the former president of the Association of Ghana Industries. Great to have you join us this evening on PM Express, but let's look at the energy sector and its contribution to economic development. SMEs, you find barbering shops, small shops that sells groceries and others, all having to shut down because of difficulty with energy. From where you're sitting, how serious and how has this impacted on our drive at economic development?
Oh, it has impacted adversely, very, 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 very much so, But at the same time, I think it is fair to the utilities, for us, all of us, to recognize that the tariff that they are working with in terms of the dollar is about half what it was when it was first implemented in December 2011, I think. So the real value of that tariff has gone down, The problem for us in industry is that we agreed a periodic adjustment with them, quarterly adjustment. And we think that if that had been done, it would have been easier for us to plan. Then you know that every quarter, a little adjustment, then you work towards it. But now we are, all of a sudden, after 2 years or so, we are faced with what could be a massive adjustment. And that, of course, is no good for anybody in business. That makes it very, very difficult. So if the PURC would just keep to the rules, because if they do this adjustment periodically, sometimes it could even come down. There are periods when the exchange rate stabilizes or even gets stronger. There are periods when the price of oil comes down. So then we could all actually monitor, because the formula has all these elements in it.
The PRC is suggesting that, well, we'll want to give you the review, but the quality of service is a problem. Consumers are complaining. So until you improve that, we're not giving you that upward adjustment. Are they right?
I think the chicken and egg situation, if we'll be sincere and honest with ourselves, it costs money to improve quality. And if we allow the money to run out before we come for a massive amount, it means that in the meantime, the quality also runs down. And if you compare that really with any of us trying to generate our own power, whether you work in a hairdresser salon and you buy a small generator, or you run a major factory and you have to buy a huge generator, that cost is several times higher than what we get from the grid. So I think that we should all get together and agree the rules, and then make sure that the rules are followed, so that we don't face this problem every 2-3 years.
The commission is supposed to seek the interest of both the utility providers and consumers. Now, how would you describe the way it has acted? For instance, you spoke about the fact that it suspended the quarterly adjustment, which is captured in the World Bank report. How would you describe the way the Commission has carried out its operations?
Well, if I'm to be blunt, I think the Commission has been rather negligent in the pursuit of its mandate. Of course, I don't know exactly why they have not done it so far, but the least they owe to the rest of us stakeholders is to have been telling us, if even they don't adjust it, they should have told us that this is what we would have adjusted it to at this stage. So do you want to make a provision for it in your accounts, in your numbers, and actually tell us quarterly what it would have been? Then we all know, and we can all track it, and we can all follow it. So whatever reason they may have for not adjusting it, at least in not keeping us aware of what would have been, I think that they haven't been exactly fair to all the stakeholders in the industry.
Mr. Tony Oteng-Gyesi, I'm going to spend the rest of my time on this show talking to my guests about the critical decisions we need to take to get this challenge resolved and get this country's economy going. But what would you want to share with us by way of that?
Several things. Number one, I think that we have a very unusual tariff structure. The kind of tariff structure where industry pays more than retail, that is residential, is unknown anywhere in the world. I think that we should adjust the tariff structure to reflect reality. And then we should also realize that industry uses a lot more. And wherever you go, when you use a lot more, you get discounts for it. So again, I mean, that should be reflected in the tariff structure, you know. And then I think it is also important that the adjustments we have talked about should happen on a more regular basis than we have it going forward now.
Right. Thanks so much, Mr. Tony Oteng-Gyesi, former president of the Association of Ghana Industries, sharing his thought on some critical decisions we need to take to get the energy sector properly in shape. But let me come back to my guest in the studio. We left off where Mr. Peter Amewu was talking about the fact that we need to start looking at the IPPs in the generation level. And I am thinking that as long as the tariffs, for instance, that Mr. Dr. Oteng-Gyesi talked about is not that good, you won't find them there.
Yeah, you are right. But let me just correct one impression by Tony before. You see, his call for discounts, I think, doesn't work in this sector.
For industry?
Yes, for industry. It doesn't work. You know, this sector works such that if you have a base generation, for instance, Akosombo, it's supposed to operate at a very cheap rate. Now, if you put in an additional load, say combined cycle gas turbine, okay, the rate is supposed to go higher. Okay, but unfortunately, as a country, what we're doing is what we call average price, you know, model. So we just added up the cost of Akosombo, that to the higher generation, which is the gas. Okay, strike it the difference and ask them to pay. It shouldn't be so. We should do a peak pricing, because any generator that comes to the load, you know, any supplier in terms of consumer that comes to the generator at peak period must pay the peak price. And so what that means is that if I am a consumer and I'm just consuming at a level within Akosombo Dam, I must be able to pay the price for Akosombo Dam. If you, as an industry, consuming more, it means you're moving from the base load to a higher regime.
So you should pay more.
You should be able to pay more. So you should pay for the gas increase. Now, if there's a renewable on top and you are still consuming more, why should I, a base load consumer, as a customer, which consume less, pay what you are consuming in terms of your gas and then the renewable? So one, there's a mistake in our pricing regime, not a mistake as such, the average pricing system. I think we should avoid it and do what we call peak load pricing. Number two, I think the regulatory format that we undertaking now, rate of return regulation for the utilities, it's not convincing enough. We must move away from that to a performance-based, you know, tariff scheme where there must be an index for penalty,
right? So
that if these utilities are able to perform well, they will gain the advantage. If they don't perform, the price automatically will deny them that ability.
So you bringing in competition.
I want us to move from the rate of return
competition here.
Yeah, I want us to move from the return tariff, okay, to performance-based tariff. That is number one. And number two, the pricing system, which is currently an average price system, where we add all our generators and divide it by, you know, the number to get the average. We should move from that and go to the peak load pricing, which means that everybody is now going to pay what it is expected. What is the cost of the power? That will again be a driving factor for IPPs to come in. Because an IPP coming in to generate at gas will know that he will be paid at a gas price. He will not be paid at a hydrocarbon in terms of...
let me go to Mr. Maferani. Dr. Otinjesi is talking about some of the decisions we need to take to get this sector properly fixed and going. And he talks about perhaps restoring the quarterly adjustment formula. Your report precisely spoke about that.
Yes. He's entirely correct. This was a very good step that the PRC introduced in late 2011, but then within the space of 1 year, after 3 or 4 quarters, they abandoned it, and we went back to the old system of no adjustment for an indefinite period, which is still today the case. We are now halfway through 2013. The financial gravity of the power utilities is well known, and yet we are still waiting for PRC to come out with a decision. And this is no way in which the utilities can be brought back to good financial health, and it's holding back private investment. And meanwhile, the government is being asked to subsidize every month huge amounts of crude oil which have to be purchased on behalf of VRA to keep the lights on, because VRA does not earn enough money with the current tariff to pay for that oil. Now, admittedly, the oil bill is very high at the moment because there's no gas. But even without that, even if we had gas supply from Nigeria or from Jubilee, there would still be a certain amount of oil that would be required in the system. And that is expensive, and somebody has to pay. If it's not recovered through the power tariff, it has to be through subsidy from the Ministry of Finance, which ultimately is Ghanaian taxpayers' money. There's no free lunch in the electricity business. And people who think that power prices are too high, deluding themselves. This is a commodity like any other item. People pay for their cell phone, their airtime, and so on and so forth.
If they can't pay, if the economy is not on good footing and the people cannot pay, how will the quarterly adjustment resolve?
How can people not pay? There is a special concessionary lifeline rate, as it's called, for low income and low users. That is low, and that will remain low. In most countries, you have that system to protect the poorest consumers. But beyond that, there is no question that residential customers who have a certain living standard, who can have appliances, who can have electric iron, who can have fridge, they can afford to pay their light bill. The same way as they pay for their transport and their cell phone usage. It's a commodity like that.
I want us to drift a bit, not away from energy, but in talking about what we're currently processing, the gas, what we're exploring, the oil and the gas. Now, if we had, by now, had the gas processing plant in place,
yes,
would we have seen the difficulty we find ourselves in?
No. The simple answer is no. The extent of pain that the country is going through today with the light off would be far, far, far reduced, if not eliminated, because there would be gas in the system. Even if the pipeline accident took place and there was no gas from Nigeria, there would be some gas available for running the power plants in Ghana. So the delay in developing the gas from Jubilee, the 3-year delay or maybe more, is costing this country huge amounts of money. $300 million a year, $1 million a day. The gas pipeline infrastructure is going to cost Ghana about the same amount of money, $800–900 million, for which Ghana has taken out a loan from the China Development Bank. And yet what we have thrown away and burned up in crude oil is equal to that same amount of money.
So it's about,
because we are 3 years late with this project.
Taking the decision and doing the right thing.
Absolutely. This gas project should have been commissioned the day that the late President Mills turned on the tap for the oil to flow. The gas should have been flowing at the same time. And that decision was not made at the right time to develop the gas project, and that is what is costing the country so dearly today. You would agree with me?
I agree with you.
Mr. Abu, I saw you shaking your head about the fact that, yes, you do agree. But, of course, talking about the gas project, we're yet to get the money to bring it into completion. So that is one worry for us.
Yeah, financing of gas infrastructure, as we are all aware, is quite a very extensive and involving issue. One question somebody will ask is, if they had started a project 3 years ago, where were they going to get the financing to finish the project on time? That would be a very
would not have been a
thing.
problem.
It would not have been a problem because
where would they
I
have
agree with
gotten
you.
the money?
There were alternatives available for this government. For instance, the Jubilee partners, in conjunction with GNPC, opted to
The World
develop
Bank was
it.
ready to
Government
finance
did
it.
not-
World Bank
government
was
did not explore it.
The African Development Bank
World
was
Bank
ready
was
to
ready.
finance it. We would have been
African
very-
Development Bank was
Yes.
there together with the partners to develop this. I mean, perfectly for government to fold its hands, and enjoy the supply of gas. Government turned its face back to such a proposal, and that is where we are here today. And so, indecision in terms of a policy decision and direction to infrastructure development has brought us to where we are, partly, and that is the cost we are all paying as Ghanaians.
And looking forward rather than looking backwards,
Yeah.
what we would say is that please let us learn from that, and going forward, let us develop the new gas fields that have been discovered,
quickly as
Sankofa and TEN, rapidly, and let us not find ourselves again in a gas short situation in 3 or 4 years from now. Gas should be expedited and fast-tracked, and this is an important message coming out of this report. We need more power plants and we need more gas, and we need a realistic tariff.
So we're trying to drift
As well as
towards
improving the
looking
performance of-
at the critical decisions we need to take. We have spoken about the fact that we need to get the quarterly adjustment thing going. We need to get our gas processing plant also moving on. But in talking about managing these things, one difficulty you came about is the structure of these utilities. How do we then get them also going by way of the management structure? After we have been able to put all this in place, how do we get the management of these utilities running in such a way that we can get the best out of them?
Better people at the top. Incentivize the people, have sanctions for non-performance. Not treat these appointments as rewards for services rendered in the past.
You think government should still not hold control over who sit where on the board?
No, fine. But there should be a pool of talented, experienced Ghanaians who can be drawn from where you can draw to appoint people. Former senior managers in both the public and private sector are available. The retirement age in Ghana is relatively low compared to some countries. People retire at 60 or at the very latest 65. In today's world, those people still have something to contribute. And even younger people who have experience of running a business, who have a professional qualification, who may be an engineer or maybe a chartered accountant. These are the kind of talented people that need to be on the boards of these massively influential and important state organizations like VRA, GNPC, ECG, providing their expertise and their talent and leadership, and making sure that the management does what they are there to do, which is to provide good service to the Ghanaian consumer.
And Mr. Ahmed, will you also talk about the fact that we need to bring in more competition? You're even talking about competition at the generation level, which is it practicable?
It's very easy. Competition at generation just means
and then
subjecting the various tendering to competitive tendering processes. Because if I'm going to build, say, a 200 megawatts, combined cycle gas turbine for $300 million, somebody will come and build the same thing for $250 million. Of course, I have saved $50 million right down from generation. So that's what I'm talking about, competition at that level.
All right.
Because
hold on for me a minute. Let me go to the phone lines. Now, the media relations manager of the GNPC, Atukobi, has just joined this discussion. Thanks so much for listening and joining us. But we're looking at critical decisions we need to take in fixing the energy sector. We have spoken about a lot. Briefly, what can you say is a challenge, and how do we fix these challenges?
Speaking, the issues to do with greater transparency, improved governance in the whole energy sector, we welcome very much. And let me even, before I say what I have now, indicate that as we indicated at the launch of the report yesterday, we are going to come up with a response to various issues that have been raised in there. In the first place, we acknowledge the importance of having all these energy sector challenges and proposed solutions in one document. But most of these, as it came up yesterday, have been known, and it was information about our projections, etc., came from us. But unfortunately, it appears the downside of it was what was highlighted by the World Bank. For instance, in talking about risk when it comes to GNPC expanding its activities. And it's actually a matter of contradiction for anyone to expect improved revenue flow from oil, and at the same time, that person would not want GNPC to expand its activities. How do you get the revenue if you don't participate greatly or at an improved level? And there was this issue about comparing the country GDP data to suggest that at our current GDP per capita, we cannot aspire to where these other countries are. Unfortunately, if you go back to the World Bank's own website to look at the GDP per capita of these countries that we are talking about, they were way below just about where we are. Norway, if you talk about Norway was a country of fisher folk, and until the oil, it is the oil that has prepared them to the level that they are. So I think some of the inferences that they made from the current situation could be taken. The second look could be taken at them. Right, China.
Right.
If you check where they came from, basically, then regarding the governance issues, I think GNPC is one company that reports to more bodies than any SOE in the country. Besides reporting to Parliament, state enterprises, commission, the Ministry of Finance, we report to the Ministry of Energy. So I think there's a lot of corporate governance issues that we are complying with. And beyond that, now we have the PRMA checking on the revenue inflows. We have the PIAC there. Also,
Mr. Atukobi, I am not rudely cutting it, but let me take you back to when you started. Now, you accepted that some of the challenges raised by the report have been raised already. Can you perhaps try and find out from you why you think these challenges remain unresolved after several years?
Well, in the discussions that our people had with the banks, and some of them, we are even aware of the attempt to, for instance, if you're talking about the tariff regime that we are talking about, that is already out there in the public. We are debating it. So there's that recognition. It is basically something that we need to get people to accept. You need to get the people along. Don't forget that the bank is out there. The people in whose hands the sovereignty lies, who voted for the government into power, are the ones the governments are accountable to. And so most of the time, of course, they look behind their shoulders whether the people are going to return them into power, if they are going to. It is a dicey thing.
So it is not an issue of economics, but political. That's how you want to put it. As long as the people would vote for you, you can keep tariffs low and get the sector in danger. Let me put it that way.
No, but you recognize also that the people, even those of them, the few who are working for the state itself recognizes it is not paying them adequately enough to be able to afford this, what we all recognize as realistic and economic tariffs. Because if you are not paying them economic salaries, how do they afford some of these things? And don't let us deceive ourselves. There's developed countries. Why is it that in some countries you have even the unemployed being paid for no wage? So there's that social responsibility on government also to do some of it. But finally, let me clear this that JP Amewu started with about the gas, for instance, development, which if had been followed, we would have completed by now. Don't forget that at the time that he's talking about a change of government, the POD had not been completed. But more importantly, there was an attempt for a sole sourcing of a Korean company to come and implement the project. If today, and it was agreed that no, let us open it up. Let us have a more transparent way of dealing with it. And at the end of it, by the time we got the POD in place, we have got some thousands of, gas for ourselves, which we are going to start, converting to fire our plants at very minimal cost.
But we are unsure when this will be put into fruition. Whilst we're sleeping in the dark, our businesses are collapsing. That's the point.
Hello.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. The media relations manager of GNPC, that took Obi there, making some interjection. But Mr. Amewu, I saw you shook your head. He made some comments about the gas project that certainly you did not agree.
Well, he was raising an issue about the project, which I think
the delay in starting of the project,
which I totally disagree with. I don't know if you had seen actually the report, but what we're trying to say is that right down at the commencement of the Jubilee, the partners make very good recommendation to Ghana government. Then GNPC was also involved. Together with the World Bank funding being provided from the ADB, they were prepared to fund this project at no cost from government. The question I'm asking is, why was that alternative not accepted? Why do we have to leave that viable alternative and now turn to our good friends from China? That is the question I'm asking. If we had accepted that alternative 3 years back before the commencement of the project, we would have finished this gas project and gas will be flowing. And if gas is flowing and there's even a shortage from Nigeria, the Ghana gas will be able to address some of the shortfalls in terms of the $1 million that we are spending every day. That's your point. That's the point.
Mr. Mathrani, then he says that your report seems to capture only the downside of the whole thing, perhaps leaving out what gigantic strides that have been achieved in the sector. Is that what you did?
No, of course not. But GNPC is understandably upset, if you like, because our report puts into the public domain the question of who it is accountable to, is there adequate transparency, and are there sufficient checks and balances on what it's doing? GNPC is something of a black box, and it requires much more scrutiny. It requires a consensus at a national level, at a parliamentary level. Does Ghana want GNPC to take its petroleum revenues from Jubilee Oil and invest them in highly speculative exploration activities outside Ghana? GNPC has ambitions to buy investments in oil exploration far away from Ghana. Has this been discussed? Has this been debated? I don't believe so.
So the transparency is not there.
The fact that more of your oil revenues today are retained by GNPC rather than paid into the petroleum funds has to be discussed and looked at and debated. Is this right? When there is a huge public finance and budgetary crisis in this country, the finance minister is struggling to meet the obligations. GNPC is being allowed to retain funds over and above what its requirements are. Now, if that is what the Ghanaian people want, fine, but there should be a discussion and a debate about these important issues about the role of GNPC.
So the GNPC is certainly not happy at the report from the World Bank. But in going forward, so we'll be getting ready to check out of the studio. Mr. Amewu, the critical decisions is what we need. But in looking at what is happening, Is government in a position to take those decisions to get us going on?
Yeah, I think government should be able to take very firm decisions rather than looking at its political interest.
They should, but do you see it coming? You look at the body language of those who make the policies. Do you see them so much touched by what this energy challenges is doing to our businesses, and so are prepared to take those decisions?
We are moving from bad to worse. And so if government doesn't take those decisions now, most of them with recommendations as enshrined in this report, if those decisions are not taken now, we will move from west to wherever I can describe. And so I think it's very important for government to consider taking those decisions, no matter how hard they are. It's better for the decisions to be taken today. And then we as consumers, customers at the benefit end must also be prepared to take some of the bullets in terms
tariffs.
of tariffs. You know, as for increase in tariff, we can run away from it. But then before the increase in tariff, certain things need to be done. You can't produce 3 megawatts of power and sell only 2, whilst you don't know where the other 2 is gone to. And so we think that those, inefficiencies, system inefficiencies in terms of transmission losses, distribution losses, management problems, those should be addressed quickly. If those are addressed and the customer is sure that you are producing at a rate that is very competitive and I'm achieving whatever you are producing, then he will also be able to pay for the increase in tariffs. Because, the difficulty is that if tariffs have increased now and we say, okay, we will pay, thinking that the utilities will go back and do the right way. They get a tariff briefly and then they forget about correcting the inefficiency in the system. So let them look at the system first. Somebody will say, where are they going to get money for to do upgrade in terms of transmission and distribution? Okay, well, that is another question. And again, their source of investment, where they go in to borrow money for to do most of this in short-term financing, is also causing a problem. They need to go to the capital market and look for good source of financing rather than looking for short-term financing, which are very expensive. And these are some of the problems they can do internally. Then we, the consumers, especially I'll be able to agree
bite
and then
the bullet
buy the bullet
and pay the right tariff.
The right tariff.
Mr. Mathrani, your closing remarks. Now, this report, Mr. Amewu seems to suggest is quite good, and if government should look at it and implement them, we should see some reliefs in the energy sector. After this report, what is next?
Well, the report was intended to provide raw material for discussion, debate among the new economic team in office this year. And we hope that it contains the ingredients that they require to help them move the sector forward. And it's a sort of warning call, please take action quickly, otherwise the risks are so great to the country's overall economic ambitions that we really are concerned. And this is something that these problems are known, the solutions are known, they can be fixed. It requires decisive action
and the will to do it.
Correct.
The political will to do it.
Correct. And I think the context is right. The public is fed up with dumsor, and
it's
so
dumsor.
This is when
right. Well, I'll forgive you for saying
for my pronunciation. I apologize.
Right.
The difficulties of the sector, as he said, will just accumulate, and the problems will become more unmanageable if we don't take decisive action today. There is no silver bullet, there's no magic wand we can wave and suddenly gas will appear or we'll have another Akosombo. That's not going to happen.
No.
Expensive power is a reality and will remain so for some time to come. That is not a very encouraging message to conclude with, but sometimes truth is bitter.
Right. Sunin Mathrani is a senior energy specialist at the World Bank Africa, talking to me right there, and Mr. John Peter Mewu, the Policy Director of Research and Policy of the African Center for Energy Policy, joined us later on. Of course, we also spoke to Dr. Tony Otinye JC, former president of the Association of Ghana Industries, and Atukobi, the media relations manager of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation. Thanks so much for having spent 1 hour with us. PM Express is on again tomorrow at 9 p.m. My name is Bright Nanafo. We have more on the Joy News channel. Good evening and see you later.